Trapped by the belief that I'm not good enough, bound by the limitations and the lies that consumed my world, this was me. It wasn't until I took the biggest leap in my life to know and trust the power within. And it was at that moment I made a choice. My past will not define me anymore. Hello, I am Terry Cardula, and I know I am not alone in this. Over the years, I have found that the number one mistake that we make is that we get in the way of our own success story. Yes, I said it. On this show, together we'll tackle limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, getting stuck, fear, doubt, overwhelm, and the imposter syndrome. Join us on this journey designed to transport you beyond your limitations to a world where anything is possible. This is Talking with Terry. Hi, and welcome back to Talking with Terry, where we have powerful conversations to transform your life and your business. And I am so delighted to be sharing with you Jamie Atkinson. So some of you know, obviously I'm here on this podcast, and how this podcast came to be, I get to blame someone. And this is right here. This is the man, the myth, the legend.
Guilty.
Of why this is and how we come to be. So Jamie, welcome to the show. And I want to dive in here, but yeah, welcome.
Terry, thank you for having me. Thank you for blaming me. I'm very honored to be blamed for creating this thing. And I'm sure everybody at home right now is like, oh, Jamie, God damn it, why did you do this? But I'm sure secretly they love the show. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah. So I want to share like a little backstory for you, because I was moving along in life, and I've always had on my bucket list to have a TV show, but not a podcast or radio, whatever, da, 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 da. And my girlfriend reaches out to me and goes, Terry, you got to check this guy out, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. I was free. I hopped on one of your like calls within like one day. Loved you, fell in love with you. And I was like, sign me up. I'm going for this. And within, a total of 60 days. I mean, I did your 30 days. I kind of cheated. I went 60 because I wanted to, do my thing.
Just wanted more of us. That's okay. That's fine.
So within 60 days, I launched my podcast, and here you are on my podcast. So such a delight.
I'm very impressed with your show, actually. There's a lot of people who, come through the process, and, sometimes they cut corners and sometimes they don't do things absolutely perfectly. Your show's awesome. Like you ticked all the boxes, dotted all the I's. Like I'm sure people really love it. And, honestly, some of the episodes that I just tuned into before were pretty good, Terry. I mean, I don't want to say like extremely good because I don't want your head to get too big, but like pretty good episodes.
Work in progress here. Work in progress. So can you believe this? Like, if you would have asked me this, I don't know, 12 years ago, I would have laughed at you and been like, and I was still at the time, like terrified of speaking. So here we are, right? The journey,
Honestly, yeah, the journey's so important. I think all of us, you look back 12 years and be like, oh, you're going to be on a podcast and have your own talk show. And you'd be like, shut up. Like about what? Pokemon cards? Like that's never going to happen, right? That would be my answer.
Yes. So for those that do not know you yet, share a little story about how you came to be where you're at, and let's start there, and then we're going to dive into some of the deeper questions here.
Yeah, I mean, my journey kind of started back in 2017, and to give you kind of like a traditional backstory of mine, I did the classic thing. I got pissed off at my boss and decided to leave because he was, just a company man through and through. And, I ended up traveling the world, which is all very influencer and a little bit, fancy, but in reality, I was living in these very, very cheap and very depressing hostels most of the time because I was trying to figure out how to make money online. And what was really kind of fun is it took me probably a good 2 years before I was getting to grips with it. And, at the time I'd really struggled, had 3 or 4 different businesses, all of them had kind of failed. And eventually I came across this guy called Russell Brunson, flew to Funnel Hacking Live. We kind of went all out to face this fear of trying to build this business. And somewhere along the way, he shared this idea of podcasting with me. And after that event, I signed up for a coaching program I absolutely couldn't afford and ended up starting to try and figure out how to build my business. And 2-3 months later, after launching that podcast, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I launched a podcast. And 2-3 months later, I started to figure out how to make money with it without really needing any download numbers. And that was really exciting. I was like, oh man, like I'm making money for the first time in forever. And then a lot of my friends were like, Jamie, you should help other people do this with their podcasts. And that was about 18 to nearly 20 months ago now. That was back in May of 2019 when I launched the podcast Profit Lab. And it's been a hell of a ride since then. We've helped over 250 people launch podcasts. I think last year there was $6 million generated from students coming through the program just using our strategies, which is really humbling, really mind-blowing, but awesome at the same time. Like, I'm so happy that that's happening. And that's kind of where I am today.
That is powerful. So I know with any challenge, with any, any of our paths, there are challenges, barriers, there's blocks that we've had to overcome. So share with our audience, 1 or 5 or 12. No, I'm just kidding. Share with us some of those challenges that you've had to overcome, because there's so often we see that. And even though it was a short amount of success, I mean, it was a fast one, right? Like you went from living in a hostel to, creating 7 figures is in a short amount of time. And there's a lot of people that says, okay, I can't do that, or, woe is me, or whatever else, all the other stories that get in our way. So, share with us, a challenge that you had to overcome in order to step into that fully.
Oh my gosh. I mean, especially this last year, there have been so many challenges. We were just talking before the podcast interview. I went through a personal breakup in December with somebody that I'd been with for 3.5 years, somebody that worked with me inside of my business, that essentially we did everything together. I mean, that was like super, super challenging. But also, really the whole entire of 2020 was this ginormous challenge for me. And the way I kind of think of it is I really think of like business in levels. And a lot of the time, a little bit trying to get to the end of like a Donkey Kong episode, you really want to try and get to the next level all the time. As entrepreneurs, we're pushing, we're trying to grow. And I spent really the whole of 2020 really just trying to learn more about myself, unpack myself, before running a million miles an hour trying to grow a 7-figure business. And, and I want to just clarify, we're not at 7 figures yet. We've helped generate 7 figures. So I'm kind of pissed that my students have made more money than me, but not really. I'm actually really happy for them. But, we spent, the first year doing launch style business activities. We went from May to May, we did $250,000 to $280,000 in revenue just through Stripe alone. And it was crazy. Like we went from doing nothing to doing everything super, super fast. And everybody really paid attention and everybody was paying notice. And it was good and it was exciting and it was, monumental, but it was also exhausting. And this is something that I talk about a lot nowadays, is that live launch mentality of, fill a face group full of people, cheer them on, get them to engage, like show up, do a 5-day presentation, sell people with a big offer stack and a value stack. Like it was just exhausting. And I'm an outgoing person. I'm a massive extrovert. I get tons of energy from connecting with people. And even me, who is that extroverted person, got completely burnt out with this model. Another person that I'm super good friends with, Alex Elliott, also got burnt out doing a model like this. Another extroverted person, and she actually completely quit that business. She did an entirely different business. And that's the extroverts. Like if you're an introvert and you're looking at this model and you're saying, man, like I've got to sell this way, that's a really daunting task. And one of the big challenges that I've helped a lot of my students go through in the last couple of months has been this idea of, oh my gosh, I've got to go and do this big, showy, over-the-top launch. And actually, there's a student, I'll share about a story quick here. A student I work with called Lois Kofi is an incredible woman, has a sales background. She's done MLM for years. She's very resilient, probably the most resilient person that I coach. And Lois had done 4 live launches in the last 4 months and just really had faith that if she did it enough, it was going to pay off. And every time she would do it, she, did the launch, she got people there, she got the lead, she got them through the process. And, the offer stack came and then the offer went out and it was like crickets, right? It was like 1 or 2 people that maybe bought. And then because she's resilient and she's hardy, she would then go get on the phone call with everybody that opted in and be like, hey, like, come on, let's get on the call. Like, and she would like force her way into, selling a couple of people into the program, not forcing them, but forcing herself to work extra hard to make those 2, 3, 4, 5 extra sales just to make ends meet. And she'd done 4 of these launches back to back. And, she was, one-on-one coaching with me. She had personal stuff going on in her life, all sorts of stuff that's happening, just feeling the weight of 2020, which I think so many of us felt this year. And I was feeling the same. I just spoke to you a second ago, Terry, after December and after I broke up with my ex-girlfriend, I took 2 to 3 weeks off in December. I was just like, okay, bye. All right. And I just disappeared from my business. January, we, started back up again. But we had our lowest revenue month ever in January. Ever since we started the business, I think the smallest revenue month we'd ever had was $12,000, which was our first month. We did $9,000 in January with like $20,000 worth of expenses. It was really sobering. It was a really big wake-up call, because I knew what I needed to do to get out of it, but I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And also, go on.
I just think that what you're speaking and this truth that you're speaking and being vulnerable and being able to share this, I think there's a lot of people in this position that you're talking about. And I also can personally relate. I can personally relate to some launches that I've had where they've like, what? Like, here it is, this big hype, and there's energy and it's exciting and it's fun. But then if you don't have that return on investment, it can be so frustrating and really, it takes a hit.
It's also challenging to scale. We realistically have been at, we've done around about $530,000 worth of revenue in our business right now, but we're running at about $300,000 a year, which isn't a lot more than what we did the previous year, right? We haven't really grown in terms of the revenue that we're doing. And the problem is we're kind of hitting that scale ceiling. And we've tried in the last year to get out of that. We've tried to go and run ads, and we've tried to buy an ad team, and we've tried to do all of those things. And the real problem, Terry, when you're selling a program cheaply, like when you're selling a program for $997, I know some people listening are like, cheap? What are you talking about?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. I just got to take and say, like, your program, best $997 I've spent in a really long time. And I'm telling you, it was so like yummy. And I mean, it was so value packed, like easily you could have been charging 20,000. Like like the value of it was, and beyond, maybe even, I mean, I hopefully 20,000 is not insulting, but
no. I'm like, very, very generous of you. Thank you.
But I'm just saying it was so in depth. It was so like, it was fantastic. Right.
And here was the lesson, and this was the thing that I missed, because what you just said then is actually the truth for so many course creators. A lot of course creators, they're doing hybrid models right now. They're doing courses, but they're also providing coaching. When we were doing our coaching model, we were doing as much as 3 coaching calls a week. Now, it was only for 28 days, but the reality was I was coaching 3 days a week, every day of the year. Right? I was coaching 24/7, 3 days a week. So what we realized is when we started running ads was that we just had to be really good at everything in order to make any money. So we would spend, a ton of money, we would run some ads, we would do a webinar, whatever it is, and we would usually get to about $500 to get a customer. So by the time they've opted in, they've showed up, and we've been able to sell somebody, it usually cost us about $500. And that was actually not bad. That's actually pretty good for most people who are running a webinar. A lot of people are way higher than that. And when we got that customer, most people are like, cool, like you sell a program for $997, you made $500 in profit. But it doesn't exactly work that way, because some people will pay a payment plan, so the average comes down. And we were averaging around about $650 per person that buys in collected cash. Now, the problem with that is that that's only $150 that we actually make. Revenue means nothing. Profit is everything. So when you look at that, in order for us to make $20,000 or $30,000 in sales, we had to do a lot of volume. And the problem is when you do a lot of volume, what happens? The cost goes up, right? Ad costs can double or triple as you put more people in. So on one hand,
you don't have that profit margin, then it's just, you're not creating beyond that, right?
It was so hard. And honestly, Terry, I was running at this every single angle. I was trying to make the webinar better. I was trying to make the ads better. I was doing the follow-up better. And I was trying to get these incremental increases. And I was trying to be the best in all of these different areas. But what I didn't realize, it was the price that was holding me back, because rather than being amazing at all of these different things, having an amazing close, an amazing webinar, all of these different things, instead, if I was actually incredible at all of those things, I was only going to make an extra $100 per customer. But instead, if I focused on a really solid way that I could sell my program high ticket, and this is what we use the podcast for now, and this has really come full circle with what I teach, it's just way better. For example, what we realized was, hey, what if, and this was sounding absurd. It's like, what if instead of me coaching 3 times a week, every single week, but only letting people show up for 28 days, what if I just let everybody show up for the year? I was like, oh, well, I'm still going to be doing the same amount of coaching that I was before. And if right now you're listening to this and you do a 28 or a 60-day program and you realize in reality you're coaching every day of the year, just give people access to show up, because people will show up when they have a question, and when they don't have a question, they won't show up. So you're never going to be at full capacity, even with hundreds of people inside of your program. And when this clicked for me, and I was like, oh, okay. So what if the Podcast Profit Lab wasn't 28 days, but what if it was a year? How much bigger could the results be that I could get my dream customers? And this is when it all started to click for me, because, money and scale is one thing, but in reality, the reason we want to scale our business is because we want to create more of an impact. We want to be able to get bigger and better results for people. That's where the real fulfillment comes. And I had this epiphany probably around about February. And I just immediately took action. I killed off every single program that I was doing that wasn't this brand new program, this extended version of the Podcast Profit Lab. And almost overnight, our business quadrupled. All of the losses that we made in January and February came back. But more importantly, is people were way more committed to actually getting the result. So all we did was we took our program that was in 28-day chunks, and we just said, okay, right, we're going to actually make it a 9-week process, a 9-week course instead of the 4-week course. So I'm going to give you more. I'm going to walk you through these different steps, and I'm actually going to help you understand how to get to the end result. But the coaching was for 12 months. And in doing that, it made the offer greater, and we could afford to charge $5,000. And the other thing that was really cool is that because we were charging more money, we changed the sales environment. So instead of selling on a big fancy webinar and me being exhausted because I have to be the dancing monkey and I have to do this big offer stack that sounds super salesy, instead it's just on the phone. I'm just talking to people about their problems, and if it's a good fit and the program can help them, then we offer it to them. And it's just been such a relief, Terry, to really understand that this model that we can go for is just so much easier. My team, and I just want to share with you guys, I had 5 full-time team members in December. I now have 2. It's me and one other person. And our workload has dropped dramatically because we've simplified everything.
Wow.
It's not these live launches anymore. We don't have to do a big launch every 28 days, but also we don't have to do a group of people for 28 days. We've got this kind of evergreen enrollment now. So it's much, much simpler for when people start a program. I think, Terry, you had even said, when joining my high-level coaching program, you had said, oh, this was cool, but I felt like, some people were further ahead. So I felt like I was left behind. And that's the problem when you do launches where people come through in cohorts, right? If it's a 90-day cohort or a 6-month cohort or a year cohort, if people join later, they feel left out. Yeah. Whereas if you've got that evergreen hybrid model, people can join at any point and everybody's at different stages, and they don't feel like they're falling behind. So this was a ginormous challenge for us, and the challenge was in a number of areas. It was doing too much in our business. It was also in my personal, struggles. And also, the other challenge, which was really the biggest one, was scale. How do we take this business bigger? And how do we get that support and help from people at the same time?
But what you've been talking about, which is so powerful, which I think it just, again, people need to hear this, because I think sometimes we feel like we need to be doing it a certain way. And maybe there is an easier way if we're open to, and this has been your process, right? Like you knew it's kind of that unconscious incompetence, right? Like we don't know until we know, and then we don't know, and then once we start going to that competent consciousness, we start to understand what we don't know, right? And then you grow into it, and then you figure it out, you play with it. And so that's been your process in this journey, and now you're finding a better way to serve bigger and better, which is more powerful.
I think this is what's really powerful, and this is why I always encourage people, share your losses and share the things that you struggle with. Because, in this process, ultimately, and I shared this with a student the other week, it's hey, tell your people what you're actually doing in your business, and then teach them how to do what you're doing. Because so often we sometimes feel and it's not always the case, if you help someone get fit in your business, then maybe you're not going to show them the behind the scenes of what you do. But a lot of the time, we're business owners and we're teaching other people in business how to do what we do. And it was really interesting to me because, in what we teach inside of our podcasting program, a lot of it is about authority and a lot of it is about leveraging that authority. And, a huge portion of it is being able to sell a product using podcast closing. And it's been highly successful. What was really crazy is that when I analyzed 99% of the people who've had success with podcast closing, which is the strategy I teach inside of our program. And if anybody's listening, they're like, what's podcast closing? I'm going to give you at the end of this episode a free 5-day pop-up podcast, which will tell you a little bit more about it. But essentially, podcast closing is the main way that we teach people how to monetize. 99% of people who've had success with it have done it with a high ticket offer. So I'm like, why am I not embracing this for myself? And why am I not teaching my students how to do it the way that is having success? And it was the other really big realization, and I really only understood this about 6 months ago. And bear in mind, my program has been going at that point, had been going for like 14 months, is I realized that the biggest benefit that people were getting from putting their podcast out there wasn't just in the strategy of being able to make money. Like, it was great. It was a benefit. It got them going. It kept them publishing for the longest time, which is great compared to other, ways that people do it. I think the average person only does 7 episodes before they quit. I think most of our students, they're still publishing to this day after they launch. But what was really powerful was recognizing that it was the podcast itself, which actually helped in so many other areas of the business. The authority and the credibility that comes from being out in the marketplace, being a top 200 podcaster, interviewing incredible experts, being seen as that authority is ginormous, and it impacts everything. It impacts how many people show up. It impacts how many people pay attention. It impacts how much people trust you. And it also impacts how many people hear about you and spread the word about you and talk about you. And it's this giant piece that's really difficult to see tangibly. But when you have it, every single person I know who's come through our process that started a podcast and is still publishing, their business has grown. Sometimes it's not always a direct correlation, but their business has grown. There's no one I know that's still doing a podcast and they're saying, man, Jamie, my business dropped in revenue. Apart from me, if you look at like January, but it came back up again, right? It's it's in that upward trajectory. And this was a really powerful realization for me. And, it was a little bit like the story of the ham and the garlic. And I don't know if you've ever heard this from Alex Hormozi, but it's like, this little boy walks in and, he sees his grandma and his dog's there and the dog's covered in ticks. And the grandma says, oh, here's what you need to do to get rid of the ticks. You need to give him some garlic. So this, kid walks up, he tries to feed the dog garlic. The dog's like, hell no, that's garlic. I ain't eating that, right? And obviously the dog talks in the story. And then the grandma said, like, hey, what happened? Did you just try to give him the garlic? No, you got to wrap it in ham, right? You got to give him what he wants in order to give him what he needs. And it was so powerful for me to realize that actually this is the truth in entrepreneurship. We have to sometimes give people what they want. And so many people want to be able to figure out how to monetize their podcast and grow their business. So I'm going to sell that to you. I'm going to give you what you want and I'm going to show you how to do it. But in the process, I'm also going to give you what you need, which is to publish consistently with a show, which is going to help you in every aspect of your business. So really, to realize that was ginormous for me.
That's brilliant. And I will say that when you tap into podcasting or whatever that other device is, it's a tool to help you. And you're absolutely right, to be seen, I can't tell you. No, I told people that I was really resistant to writing a book. I finally wrote a book and I understand the power. Once I'm on the other side of that, it opened up a lot of doors. Okay. It really did. But I will have to admit that having a podcast opened up millions of doors. And the possibilities are endless, and so it's just another avenue of folks for being able to have a platform, create that trust, create that authenticity, and really connect with their audience in a different way and allow you to have a bigger impact in the world. And I think that is just, a beautiful way to kind of wrap this up for us today is, being able to create a bigger impact for all of us, right? So Jamie, how can people connect with you?
Well, honestly, the best way to connect with me is just on Instagram. So many people, they overcomplicate this. Go to this funnel and download this. Like, if this resonated with you guys, and if you're looking at Terry and listening to this show and you're thinking, wow, it would be awesome to be able to grow my business and maybe a podcast is the answer, just hit me up on Instagram. It's at Jamie Atkinson, JamieAtkinson. Just shoot me a message. You can tell me, hey, Jamie, I was listening to the episode with Terry. You can even shoot me the word podcast if you want to learn more about how we use this strategy. And actually, I've got a free piece of content, which is super powerful. A lot of people love this. And it's actually the 3 ways that we monetize podcasts. And it's how we generated, for all of our clients, they generated $6 million just using these 3 strategies. And it's a 5-day pop-up podcast. So if you're listening to a podcast right now, this will load straight into your app. So if you want that, it's completely free. You can head to changemakersmovement.com/5 days. You'll get all of the emails and get all of the stuff coming through. And then afterwards, I email a lot anyway. So every day I'm going to have some weird, bumbly story about some crazy stuff that I did in Costa Rica. So you might end up in there as well.
Well, and we will put that information down in the show notes. So grab that information. And Jamie is just, this has been fantastic. Thank you for being here with us today. And because you're coming in from Costa Rica. I'm a little jealous. Okay.
It's beautiful here. I was actually just in Mexico for the weekend on a quick little visa run in Tulum, and I'm back now in Costa Rica. And honestly, it's wonderful. Sunlight is like the healer for everything. Just get some sun. Go to Florida if you need to. Get some sun.
Absolutely. It's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Jamie.
No worries. Thank you for having me, Terry.
I am so grateful that you joined me for this episode. If you've enjoyed this, then there's just one thing that I would like you to do. Click to subscribe and leave me a rating and review. As my way to thank you, let's connect for a free consultation. Just reach out to me at talkingwithterry, that's TERI.com, to book your time.